Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining the ACA Small Business Bootcamp and Resource Collective for this Tuesday, July 20th. Excited to be back with you. This week, we want to start by thanking all our community partners. We could not do these boot camps without them, their time, their effort, and their expertise. And today is a great example. We see here Local First, and we have Gabe from Local First with us today, and we'll get into that shortly. But we have a ton of community partners that have helped out and continue to help with the boot camp to provide expert content to support businesses throughout Arizona. As you can see, the Small Business Bootcamp and Resource Collective is designed to help small businesses recover and return from the COVID crisis stronger than ever. It is a statewide initiative supported by all of our community partners. And not only is it the webinar and the Resource Collective, but it's also content library, and we'll touch on that here in a moment. So the Resource Collective part of it is a link on our website, on the Bootcamp website, that goes to a web page set up to house the guides and resources brought by our community partners to help support small businesses. We have a number of different guides on there to target every different industry out there, just about to help support anywhere from cosmetologists to construction, to manufacturing, to retail, restaurants, and more can be found on the Resource Collective. Additionally, as I mentioned, it's a content library, and we record all of our webinars. So today's session will be recorded and posted on our website. And we do that with nearly every webinar. There's just a handful that we couldn't due to licensing agreements, but most of them are recorded on there. We have over 140 of the webinars recorded and on our website under the archive, as you can see there, listed by week, and you can go back and review any of those bootcamp presentations and those webinars at any time, or share them with friends or family if they have, or other business colleagues that may have a topic that they're interested in. It is a great tool, and again, it's a content library of over 140 expert sessions that you can access at no cost. You don't need to register or belong to anybody or any association. They're on there for your benefit. So we're excited to be able to share that with everyone. Additionally, a couple other websites that are very good resources to know about is the state's COVID-19 information and resources website, arizonatogether.org. And then the Arizona Commerce Authority set up at the beginning of COVID, the COVID-19 business resources website at azcommerce.com/COVID-19. And on this website, you can find business guidance, you can find funding opportunities, and many other key resources for businesses throughout Arizona. Additionally, the ACA has programs to help support small businesses. We have our Small Business Services, our Workforce Division, and then our Arizona Manufacturing Extension Partnership, Arizona MEP. Another program we have to help those startup businesses or businesses looking to expand their product lines is our Small Business Checklist. And this is an online interactive resource that can help entrepreneurs with the licensing, registration, and compliance information at the local, state, and federal levels. There's also a lot of other great information on starting your business, growing your business, procurement and marketing opportunities that you can find through the checklist program. It is a wonderful resource available to you, again, at no cost. So we'd like to transition to some small business updates. On these updates, PPP loan forgiveness, the SBA announced that they're working on a new portal to help make the forgiveness portion of PPP loans easier for both the lenders and small business owners. We'll post a link in the chat with some information on this. It's an article from the Business Journal that goes into explaining some of this program and some information from the SBA regarding the new portal that they're working on. They're hoping to have it up and going in August. But we talk about that because there are still a lot of small businesses that have not applied for forgiveness. And if you received a PPP loan, you do have to apply for forgiveness in order to get that. And you need to do that through your lender. So we want to remind everybody Also, just a quick mention of the employee retention credit. This is a credit, a tax credit program that can be pretty sizable for small businesses out there. It can be worked in conjunction with the PPP loan, but it gets kind of complicated. We wanted to share some information on that because it is a great program. And you may want to reach out to your accountant if you have one to learn more about how you can apply for that. Also, the SBA has the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Targeted Advance. It is open to eligible businesses, and then we'll share the link to go find out the link to their website so you can find out if you are an eligible business. And then another tool and resource out there just to share is the Arizona Small Business Development Center Network, and that link will be provided. So as we transition, we look at some of the upcoming sessions. Tomorrow we have a special session on PPP forgiveness, but it is in Spanish, so it'll be entirely in Spanish. Maximizando tus opciones del PPP. So please join us if you're a Spanish speaker or know of any Spanish speaking business owners that would benefit from this. Please share this link with them. We want to make sure that all business owners throughout the state get the information on PPP forgiveness. And that is going to be brought to us by our friends at Chicanos por la Causa and Prestamos CDFI. On Thursday, we have lean planning with live plans pitch. This is a great business planning session to participate in and learn about live plan. And it's a no-cost program that you can access in conjunction with the SBDC. So we're excited to have them on to share that. And then next week, we have some great sessions with legal considerations for every young or growing business and small business tax credits that'll be presented by James Pipper of the SBA and Lisa Novak of the IRS. So great partners in those sessions. So with that, we're going to go ahead and transition in today's sessions. We've got Gabe Gardner. He's the Director of Food Programs for Local First Arizona. And you can see he's got a master in sustainable food systems. He knows food stuff. And today's session, I'm excited about as he talks about it. And I encourage non-restaurants to participate as well, because as Gabe talks about menu design and profitability, a lot of that can be applied to Main Street small businesses that are not restaurants, that have a menu of services and products that they sell. So with that, Gabe, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to you, let you share your screen.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. And thanks for asking me to be here today. And I appreciate the partnership that Local First and Arizona Commerce Authority have. So thank you. I will go ahead and share my screen and dive on in. So I want to talk about, or been asked to talk about, profitable menu design today. And as Robert mentioned, my name is Gabe Gardner. I'm the Director of Food Programs for Local First Arizona. And in the time that I've been in the restaurant industry, which is my entire adult life and then some, I've seen menus and kind of the way that they're structured and the way that they drive a restaurant's focus, ebb and flow and change and morph. And so the slides that I put together this morning, I think represent kind of where we're at now. Not only on the other side or getting over COVID-19 or figuring out what the restaurant world looks like post-COVID, but also just some general trends that I see within the industry. So to that, I talk often about the menu being the backbone of the operation. So, and while it is critically important, I think it's also important to understand how the guest views it. So this first point, a Gallup poll found that an average customer spends 109 seconds studying the menu, right? So that's just short of 2 minutes. So that's not a very long time. Now, if your menu is, you're a sandwich shop and you've got 6 sandwiches, 3 salads, and 2 soups, like maybe 2 minutes is long enough. But if you're a full service restaurant, a steakhouse or something, and you've got, a 4-page menu, that's not a lot of time. So during the time, they're going to scan the menu, they're going to read descriptions, they're going to look at prices, which there's a tremendous amount of psychology that goes into how we price things on a menu, and they make a decision. So these questions are, what does that mean for the owner operator? Well, the first one I identified is they're not looking at the menu for a very long time. Um, we'll talk in a little bit about kind of the first moment of truth, which often for restaurants in this day and age, probably more often than not, happens through our cell phones first. Um, and they may well have some preconceived notions or even know what they're going to order prior to walking into the restaurant, um, or up to the food truck or your farmer's market stand or your pop-up on a bar patio, right? So that said, a simple, concise, well laid out and streamlined menu is going to serve us best. And the trick or the focus for the restaurant should be driving the guest towards what you have that you want to sell. Um, Menu mix is this idea where you might have more profit on, I don't know, a pasta dish than on a filet mignon. And that's fine because what's going to happen is those two are probably two of the extremes of the spectrum. They balance each other out. And so at the course of service or the course of a week or a month or an accounting period, it all averages out to be where your food cost is where you'd like it to be. But the menu is a way to funnel guests towards signature items, the things that have the most profit in them for you. So what can the menu do for our operation? Well, a well-designed, thoughtfully designed menu can make a significant impact on revenue by drawing attention to these items, and it leaves a lasting impression with the guest. I don't know that you can overstate those last 5 words, the lasting impression with the guest. So if you think about the last time you had a poor experience in a restaurant, and the last time you had a fantastic experience in a restaurant, um, most folks are willing and readily able to talk about the negative experience, right? So there's a restaurant from town where I grew up in Ohio that I had a horrific experience with, and I won't bore you the details of it, but every time that it comes up, and this is probably mercy 15 years ago, every time that that restaurant comes up in conversation, I'm always like, that place. And so on the other side of that, what we have is this ability to use our menu to create a genuine, memorable, and positive experience for the guest, so that going forward, when that restaurant comes up, they say, oh man, you've got to go and you've got to try that roasted pork sandwich, right? So these tips should only be implemented with your restaurant's individual brand and personality in mind. So what might work for a food truck operator, having just an A-frame chalkboard that you write the menu on at each different stop and event that you're at, that's not going to work for a fine dining steakhouse or a seafood restaurant, right? So think about the image that you want to portray for the restaurant and have the menu be an extension of that and a vehicle to drive home that branding. Okay, there we go. All right. So for most guests, especially first timers, they're accessing menus online before ever stepping foot into a restaurant. So I know, not to share too much, but I know Robert just came back, who was on a vacation. And I know that whenever I go out of town, I begin researching restaurants and places that we would like to eat. My wife and I went to Los Angeles last month for the weekend, and that's what we did. And I found out a lot of information through my computer or cell phone prior and kind of researched our trip that way. So from an owner's perspective or a restaurateur's perspective, is your menu easily accessible online, and is it easily accessible on mobile devices? So if your website doesn't translate to a cell phone and there's someone from out of town and they're driving around and they want to go to ramen near me, right? They punch that into Google and your restaurant comes up, but the digital interface between how you have the menu presented and their cell phone is wonky. What that is it's called a moment of truth, right? And so this moment of truth is that they had an expectation of being able to access the menu and there was a failure there. So this next question, are you the first hit on Google when searched? That there are entire classes and courses at universities about SEO, search engine optimization, and figuring out how to make your restaurant the first hit when someone Googles ramen near me. That is much and far beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. But there are ways and tricks and tips that you can use on the backside of the website, search words and key phrases to at least boost you up in that search bar. The menu can improve the entire dining experience. It can boost your perceived value for your brand. It will strategically drive customers and their buying decisions towards you and increase profits, but only if it can be easily found online, right? So if we've identified that most folks are interfacing with the restaurant prior to stepping foot in the restaurant, the menu becomes this critical piece to have set up in a digital format that's easily accessible. So what I would suggest is, once you figure out how you're going to present the menu, whether it's posting it, if your menu revolves every week or every month, you can do something as simple as posting it on Instagram or Facebook. I still think that there needs to be a website. The website is almost like a digital business card, right? So hours of operation, ways to contact you, address, that type of thing, menu, maybe some photos of the food. And then digital sources like social media become for more daily, weekly, kind of immediate type things. All right, so next one. All right, so here's another little statistic from Bournemouth University, found that there's this sweet spot between too few and too many choices. So there's a little hamburger pop-up that I helped incubate out of our kitchen in Mesa, and they have three things on the menu. They have a cheeseburger, a double cheeseburger, and French fries, and they're fantastic, right? And they pop up at various tap rooms around the valley and bars, and they're great, but there's only three things, right? And so you either want a cheeseburger, a bigger cheeseburger, and then the real question is, do you want French fries or not? And they're doing well, but I'm encouraging them to broaden their offerings a little bit, right? I'm not saying that they should start selling, roast beef sandwiches or fried chicken, but maybe have three different types of cheeseburgers, right? Maybe they incorporate a plant-based option, something like that, because it broadens their reach. But what they don't want to do, because they are a mobile establishment and they're popping up at various places around the city, is they don't want to try to be all things to all people, right? So a restaurant like the Cheesecake Factory is a fantastic example of trying to be all things to all people. And their menu is truly 30, 40 pages long. It's a ring, it's a 3-ring binder. And so this burden of choice becomes overwhelming. So customers like to see 6 items per category in kind of this fast casual environment, and 7 to 10 in fine dining restaurants. So per category, meaning entrees, salads, desserts, so forth. So again, harkening back to what type of restaurant are you operating? What type of food service operation do you have? For this hamburger pop-up, I do think that they're limiting themselves by not having several choices, but what they don't want to do, again, is to be all things to all people. So provided that it fits with your brand, with your image, these numbers, this 6 items or 7 to 10 items, you can tweak those ultimately to meet your guests where they are. So match the length and options on your menu with your customers' expectations. So I taught at culinary schools for a long time. We talked a lot about customers' expectations and kind of what they were thinking coming into a restaurant. And so a perfect example is price. So if you're spending $35 on an entree, your expectation goes way up, right? And if you're spending $8 on an entree, you still have an expectation, but it's different, right? So me spending $8 on a cheeseburger, at a pop-up at a tap room in the East Valley is different than going to a fine dining steakhouse and spending $35 on a steak. They can both be fantastic experiences from a diner's perspective, and they can both be really well done from the restaurateur's perspective, but they're just different things. So when laying out the menu, there's 7 things that are kind of, we can write them in stone, so to speak. So the first thing is something called the golden triangle. And then there's using white space, giving some sort of visual direction, figuring out how to price things strategically, the burden of choice, which we've touched on, whether or not to use pictures. And if you're not going to use pictures, choosing the right words to say is important. So the golden triangle is this idea that menu engineering specialists came up with that say your eyes start in the middle of a page and then they move to the top right and then to the top left, right? So it creates this triangle. So what that means, if you have a physical printed menu, or even if you're looking at it on a cell phone or a tablet, the way you order the things physically on the menu is important to the way the guest perceives it and what they choose. So if your chicken sandwich is the thing that you want to sell because it has the highest profit, it's the thing that you're known for, and it's your signature dish, and that's why people are driving from all over to your restaurant, it should be the very first thing that they see, right? So it should be in the middle of a page. And then the next, most profitable item on the top right, and then top left, and so on, right? That's not to say that you're not going to have the pasta dish on the menu and that you're not going to have, some other things. But that's just the way menu psychologists see eyes moving around a page. Use white space. So studies show that white space improves readers' comprehension by 30%. As many Zooms as we've all been on in the past year and a half, I know I've been in Zoom presentations where a presenter puts, what appears to be a whole book's worth of text on one slide, and it's real tiny, right? And it becomes confusing and overwhelming. It's hard to read. So if you want your menu to have this lasting impression and to create that positive experience, just give it some space to breathe, right? I'll also say that if you're trying to confine your menu to one sheet, if you follow this 30% white space rule, what it tells you is that you've got some choices to make. If there's something that isn't selling, ask yourself the question, is it not selling just for the moment? Is it not selling ever? Is it on the menu because it's your pet project, or it's a dish that you really love? Or just because it's always been on the menu doesn't mean that it needs to stay on the menu, right? If it's not selling and it's not generating revenue and it represents product loss, then I don't think that there's anything on a menu that should be sacred. So really be critical about that. And oftentimes when I work with entrepreneurs, I challenge them to find someone who is objective about the business. So when we work in the business each and every day, it gets hard to work on the business because we're working in the business. And so if you can find that objective third party, whether it be another restaurant owner, someone from ACA or from Local First Arizona, that's our job. Someone from SBDC, and ask them their honest opinion. All right, give some sort of visual direction. So if something is important, right? So I mentioned a chicken sandwich, highlight it, right? So whether you underline it or put it in, a box that's maybe a different color from the rest of the text of the menu. I don't know, you put an asterisk or a little, your logo next to it, something like that, right? And that draws customers' attention towards it. You see this a lot in chain restaurants for sure. And they'll put everything from, a little like a fire emoji next to it to denote that it's spicy, or they'll put like a big check mark next to it. And then at the bottom it says, signature item, that type of thing. And we can do that as well in small independent restaurants for sure. And I would say we have more of an opportunity as independent owner operators to engage the guest, right? So if you are a food truck, or if you are a small sandwich shop and somebody comes in and you can see them kind of debating, you can say, well, what are you in the mood for? Or you can make a suggestion. Hey, our chicken sandwich is really, it's the best thing going. And talk to them about it. And when you start engaging in a dialogue with those people, what you're doing is you're building a relationship. As you build a relationship, that may be the thing that they remember about the restaurant. Yes, the food has to be good, absolutely, right? But if you can engage in that relationship to where the guest feels appreciated, they feel welcomed, right? Then they're much more likely to come back over and over. All right, so now we talk about price. So Cornell found that diners who ordered from a menu without dollar signs spent significantly more than those who ordered from a traditionally priced menu. Spicy chicken sandwich, I don't know, house-made aioli, 9, as opposed to having that dollar sign in front of it. I will say that while I believe this statistic or the findings from this study at Cornell, I do think that this puts a certain type of kind of thought or expectation on the menu. So if, and this next sentence explains it, if the menu items are more expensive, but quality is the focus, menu design can be used to downplay that cost, and removing the dollar signs is a way of doing that. I tell a story a lot. There's a woman that I work with, and she does Cajun food pop-ups. She pops up at different farmers markets, and she has just an A-frame chalkboard sign, and she popped up at a farmer's market in Mesa, and then she pops up at the Scottsdale farmers market when it opens in the fall. And I've visited her at both, and I happened to be at the Scottsdale market once, and I walk up to her and I said, well, hey, there's no prices on your A-frame, right? So shrimp po' boy sandwich or whatever she was selling. And she said, yeah, I know. And I said, why not? And she said that when she's in Scottsdale, she can charge more because the customers, the atmosphere will bear it, versus, if she's somewhere else where it won't. And she also said, most folks at a farmer's market don't ask. So now that said, she's charging $13 for this sandwich, in Mesa, and $14 for it in Scottsdale. But understanding what the market will bear, dependent upon where you are, is very important. Don't lose sight of the fact that the menu is a direct reflection of your restaurant's pricing strategy and your brand, right? So if there is something that's special that does perhaps cost you more money and you're charging a price premium for it, that's fine. You can do that as long as it's consistent with the brand and the focus of the restaurant, and that you're able to communicate to the guest why that's coming at a price premium. Right. So next, we talk a little bit more about strategy of price. If low prices and good value are an important part of the menu and the brand, use your menu to convey that message, and highlight economic value by enlarging prices and strategically packaging the menu items. So all that means, both of those sentences, is the way the dish is described needs to be reflective of the price. So if you have Niman Ranch beef, which is a high-end you know, kind of artisanal product, highlight that, right? And if it also becomes a teaching point with the guests, if they don't know who or what Nyman Ranch is, it's hard to understand why there's a price premium for that particular product. So this becomes your focus to educate them about why that's important, right? So you could talk about sustainably sourced, you could talk about ethically raised, you could talk about the quality of the beef or what have you. And then you don't need to finish that sentence by saying, and that's why it costs so much. You're merely educating them, right? And they're smart enough to look at the other prices on the menu and see why that price is higher. All right, so getting into pictures. So, excuse me. So a lot of folks, particularly in a printed menu, go back and forth on whether or not to use pictures. Do I use them? Do I not use them? Nice looking pictures will increase food sales by 30%, right? So I previously mentioned highlighting a particular dish by, underlining it or setting it apart in a special box on a written menu. If there is a signature dish and you've decided that you want to print pictures on the menu, then putting a picture next to that signature dish will sell it for sure. I will say in the printed format, when we talked about expectation, this sets an expectation. So if I'm sitting in your dining room and I'm looking at the menu and there's a picture of the chicken sandwich, it better look like that picture when it comes out, or else there's a disconnect, and that moment of truth, there's been a failure there. On digital boards, right? So on places where there's counter service, where you're going up and you're ordering and then you're sitting down and they're bringing you the food, these are incredibly effective. And the beautiful thing about digital boards is, from the office, if something changes, right? The portion size changes, the bun changes, the breading changes. All you have to do is take a new photo and you go into the program that's running your digital menu board and you swap out the photo. Easy enough. In a printed menu, you're married to that, for lack of a better word, unless until you want to print new menus. And neither one of those is, I'm not advocating for one or the other. I'm just saying these are some of the calculations that as owner operators we have to make. And again, this does point folks towards the items that have high margins that you would like to sell the most of. So if you decide, you know what, that sounds too tricky, then that's fine. But we still have to be able to describe the menu well. There's certain words that work really, really well, certain adjectives that work really, really well. So things like savory, buttery, crispy, pan-seared, right? House seasoned, those types of things. They elicit a visceral reaction. When someone says buttery, as someone who loves going out to eat, like, I have an understanding of what that means, right? Crispy, I have an understanding of what that means. And it is hardwired to my brain. And those are things that, because I find pleasure in them, I'm more apt to order. Words that don't work are things like boiled, right? Like, you may well boil some food as part of its preparation, mashed potatoes, right? But what you don't want to see is boiled chicken on a menu. That is not a good descriptive word. So think about the words that you're choosing. I'll also say that, depending again on your brand and the personality of the menu and of the concept, you may not need this, right? So I mentioned that cheeseburger concept that I work with, and their descriptions are cheeseburger, double cheeseburger, right? And it says on their menu, let me think, all burgers come with cheese, grilled onions, and whatever their house sauce is, right? But descriptive language will make your guests feel something when they read it. And this is another point at which I think seeking a third party, someone who is objective, and asking, say, hey, we just rewrote the menu, and take a look at it and tell me what you think. And to really ask them to be honest about it, and to be able to take that objective or that constructive criticism if it doesn't read well, or something doesn't make sense. So there's a few more points here. Suggestions for streamlining menus and lowering profits. So what I see smart restaurants and food concerns doing is operating kind of on this less is more principle. So what I mean by that is, particularly after COVID, what smart owners are doing is trimming the fat from the menu. So there's a pop-up that I work with, and they do wood-fired pizzas. And so there's a kind of a fine dining restaurant, and right next door to it is kind of this hip bar. And those two businesses share a courtyard in the back. And they decided to partner together. And what they did is they both paid for this mobile wood-fired pizza oven. And the restaurant said that when we close at 9 o'clock, we will allow some of our cooks to go out, earn extra money, right, some overtime pay, and they will operate this wood-fired pizza oven. Now, the benefit to the bar is they automatically have food service. The people that were eating at the fine dining restaurant were not necessarily going to the bar, right, afterwards. So the fine dining restaurant's more like, wine pairings and so on, fancy cocktails, things like that. And the bar is more, kind of, that's not a dive bar, but it's a bar. So what happens is they don't start the pizza oven until 10 o'clock, right? Which gives the restaurant time to close and clean up, and then the cooks go out to the pizza oven. But what's great for the bar is by 10 o'clock, the people sitting on the patio have had a couple drinks. And what happens is they're sitting there, 4 people at a table, and they start to see a pizza go by. And they look and they turn to their friends and they say, what's really fantastic? Pizza's really fantastic, right? And they see another one go by. And then before you know it, they're like, oh man, we got to get a pizza. And so they get up and they order pizza. Now, this less is more principle is applied in that they only have 3 things, right? They have a cheese pizza, a pizza with vegetables on it, and then a pizza that's got some charcuterie stuff that the fine dining restaurant makes. So house-made salamis and prosciutto, things like that. And so I think it's $12 for the cheese pizza, $14 for the vegetable pizza, and maybe $15 for the meat pizza. But by the end of the night, right, everybody sitting on that patio has gotten a pizza. And so by streamlining the menu and just creating a few small things, they make lots of money, right? And so that is based on the principle of volume, right? The pizzas aren't incredibly expensive to make. The price point isn't super high, certainly not as high as the fine dining restaurant, but they're selling a whole bunch of them, right? And it's all done through partnership and this idea of streamlining a menu to focus on what they're doing really, really well. Effective operations focus on several dishes and execute them perfectly rather than trying to be all things to all people. So if that same pizza shop, pop-up pizza shop decided that they were going to start doing Italian grinders and I don't know, sushi, right? Then it would be confusing and would not be as successful, right? Reduce the amount of text, but be descriptive. If things can be combined, then do so, right? So you could have a description for a sandwich, and then you could say, add house-made chips, $2, right? You don't need an entire description of potato chips. Everybody knows what potato chips are. Again, be careful of the amount of choices that you're giving a guest. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 for fast casual dining is usually what we recommend. More choices can be confusing for the guests, but they can also drive up our costs. So if you have a giant unwieldy menu and you've got asparagus on the menu as an appetizer, and for whatever reason that week or that month, no one's buying asparagus, the asparagus is going bad. Which brings us to this next point, which is to cross-utilize products. So if you have asparagus as an appetizer, then maybe you incorporate it into a salad or a soup, or it becomes the vegetable on one of the entrees, right? That way, if the appetizer doesn't sell that week, you're still moving the asparagus through in your other menu items so that it's not sitting in the refrigerator, losing quality. I do believe, yeah, that is it. So I know we're a few minutes early, but I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you all have at the moment.
Yes, please post your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And we have some time to ask Gabe some questions while we're waiting for some of you to ask questions. I have one on menus. I've seen on menus before where, over this past year where prices have gone up, costs have gone up, that instead of changing the prices, they've put in really fine print at the bottom that a 3% service charge will be added to your bill.
Sure.
Above and beyond any tips. Is that recommended, or do you recommend just changing the prices?
That's a heck of a question. Oh man. The answer to it is I think that's up to each individual operator. I think the thought process that goes into that is raising prices can be viewed often by our guests as a negative thing. So if I have somebody who's coming into the restaurant week after week and ordering the same dish and it was $15 and then suddenly it's $17, they're going to notice that. But if the bulk of your business, or at least a large portion of your business, you don't have that continued return business. So I'm thinking if you're somewhere, Scottsdale, where there happens to be a lot of tourists, right? Then they may not notice, right? That adding that 3% charge, I think if you do, saying something as a result of market fluctuations, we're adding this. I think you could also, I don't think you would do well to just add it to the bill, right? So Robert, you bring me the bill and it's $55 for my wife and I to have dinner, and the tax, and then there's a space for gratuity, and then it just automatically says 3%. I think it needs to be written somewhere on the menu, but I think training the wait staff, the service staff, to engage with the customer about why that is, and using it as a teaching moment to kind of bring your guests along with you. The really loyal ones, like if you're doing something really well and people are fiercely dedicated to your thing, I think they would gladly pay 3%, right?
Right.
You could, as a cost of living increase, something like that. I don't know. So that's a good question.
We do have some questions there. One, it says, do the same menu concepts apply to catering menus?
Yeah, broadly for sure. So catering menus are a little bit different in that for each client, you're creating a new menu. And when I ran a catering company for years, and what we would do is, so for a wedding as an example, we would present 2 menus. We would present kind of a nicer fine dining option, and then a lesser option that wasn't nearly as nice. And you present both of them, and I would have the price per person, so $28 per person versus $16 per person. And you present it to the client. And a lot of times what we would do is mix and match. And so you'd wind up somewhere in between 28 and 16, I think is what I said. So you'd wind up at 22, let's say. But by doing that, the client has got some choices in there, and they say, well, you know, I really like the $28 menu, a person menu, but it's a little bit out of our budget. And then you say, okay, and then you go back, and all you're doing is just pulling from column A and column B and putting them all together, right? And so that's a really decent way to boost the check average. And sometimes they may surprise you and just absolutely go for the $28 one, right? In a wedding, that happens quite a lot. So.
Excellent. We have in the Q&A box, we have some good questions. So I want all the participants to know that there's some good questions in here. So Rebecca asks, how would you suggest pricing items to entice a broader audience at a farmer's market?
Sure. So it depends on what it is that you're selling. In a farmer's market, what you're really selling them on first is you and your story. So if I think about as someone who goes to a lot of farmers markets, I don't go to farmers markets to shop for the week. Like, I'm certainly buying things that will wind up being lunch or dinner in a few days, but it's an event, right? So you take the dog and you buy a cup of coffee and you walk around, and I don't know that I've ever left the house and thought, oh, I need habanero pineapple jam, right? But once I get there and I see it and I engage with those people, I'm liable to buy it. Specifically to pricing, I think in a situation like that, you have to look at what other people are charging. So if you're you're making homemade peanut butters or juices or something, if there's someone else who is in your market who is doing something similar, see what they're charging, and I would base it on that. The last thing I'll say about pricing, and I probably should have included this in the presentation, is find out what it costs you, right? So if it costs you $1 to make green juice for the farmer's market, automatically you should multiply it by 3. That's an old restaurant trick. So you should be selling it for $3 at minimum. And the reason is, in a traditional restaurant environment, you've got 30% for food costs, 30% for labor, 30% for overhead, and in theory, 10% is profit. So multiplying everything by 3 gets you to that. That's at least a baseline, right? That said, if it costs you $1 to make this juice and you multiply that by $3, like, I think anywhere in the valley you could sell a bottle of green juice for $7 or $8. So.
Excellent. So we have another one from Donna. Says, your thoughts on the square versus printed menu?
Sure. I think it depends on the clientele. And so as somebody who is fairly adept with technology, it doesn't bother me at all. And I'm scanning it as a QR code on my phone. I'm bringing it up. I'm perfectly okay with that. My mother's coming to visit in a couple weeks, and I'm sure that she's not okay with that, right? So it really does depend on you know, who you're serving, and to think about that.
Yeah, I was I'm not a food expert. I'm a food expert in the way I like to eat food. But
Sure.
I was at a restaurant on vacation last week, and I had no problem using the QR code. You know, it was a burger joint that we had been to before out in California, and their menu is via QR code.
Yeah.
But if I was in a fine dining restaurant, I'm not pulling my phone out to try to scan a QR code.
Yeah, yeah. I went to Steak 44 2 weeks ago. My wife took me as a surprise, which was really nice. And if it's Steak 44, they would have said, get out your phone and scan this code. I probably would have said, really? So.
Even at some of the other just sit down restaurants that I go to, I don't know if I'd want to pull out a QR code, you know, my phone to scan it. But you know, I think the atmosphere that you create in your restaurant can determine that too.
Sure, absolutely.
Another one is from an anonymous attendee. Says, with the cost of printing menus regularly, especially when you have limited items such as craft beers, Do you believe that digital menus, even at booths or tables, is a more cost-effective solution?
Yeah, I do. And I think, I mean, that's partly what we were just talking about, whether you're using a QR code or whether or not, I don't know if you're talking about maybe having like a tablet at each table, which seems probably more costly. But I think also for things like that, I mean, I'm an old school restaurant guy. I think training your servers to talk about the thing, right? So if you are running a tap room and you have a beer and you know it's only going to be around for a week or two, right? You've only got one keg of it or whatever, then have them talk about that as a daily special. Like, hey, just so you guys know, we just opened up this new IPA. It's really fantastic. I can bring you a sample of it if you'd like, but it's not going to be around very long, and it's, you've got to try it. That type of stuff.
Excellent. And then Rebecca asks, also, do you suggest standardizing all recipes in order to determine price points? And then also when utilizing seasonal ingredients?
I think, yeah, I do it. Another, actually, the next one that I'm going to do on August 3rd is about profitability and the bottom line and understanding your numbers. And absolutely, if without that, you may know how many ounces goes onto a sandwich or into a salad, and you can eyeball that as the owner. But once you start training employees to do that, I think that goes out the window. So standardizing that is crucial to not only ordering, to make sure you always have the right amount of food, but also to generating revenue and profit for sure. And it can be done with seasonal ingredients. So if you've got 6 things that are the core of your menu, and every quarter or every season you're bringing in 2 or 3 specialty items, then you've got to do the pricing when those come on.
All right, Amy asks you a question. It's a really good one. Says, what percentage do you factor into pricing to pay yourself when you're doing stuff at farmers markets?
Sure. Man, Amy, I get asked that question all the time. So I'm glad you asked it today. What I do, and I think is a smart thing to do, is to figure out what you need to get paid and reverse engineer it from that. So let's just say, sake of argument, that you need to be paid $100 a week, right? Then what you do is you figure out the price of your juice at the farmer's market, your green juice, and then you're dividing that $100 and out and adding it into the price. That way, you know how many green juices you need to sell in order to make that $100, right? So if you're doing 1 farmer's market a week, that price becomes more. If you're doing 2 farmers markets a week, the price becomes less that you're paying yourself, but you're spreading that cost across all of your menu, right? So it's a cost like anything else, right? It's like the raw ingredients that you would be buying to create the juice, or the packaging, or the bottles, or the booth setup and rental fee at a farmer's market. It's a cost like anything. And so as you work that in, that's how I think you get to that point. But great question for sure. Always pay yourself, please.
Great. And I think we got one last question, which is a perfect one to kind of wrap up the Q&A period with. It says, how do we mitigate the principles of design aesthetic applied to physical menus when viewed online via third-party websites like Uber Eats, Grubhub, Yelp, etc.?
I think that the short answer is I don't know that you can. Because as I understand it, never having set this up, but as someone who's used those websites, right, you're inputting your menu items into their platform and it's displayed the way they want to display it. I think you have some choice about ordering the things like, entree 1, entree 2, entree 3. But I don't think you have any layout design capabilities within that. I think the pandemic has forever changed the restaurant industry. And I think that things like Grubhub, Uber Eats are part and parcel of the restaurant industry now, and people expect it. And so I think that it's not only do we have to fill our dining rooms up now, but we also have to be prepared to have some sort of delivery service in some capacity. So the downside of that, I mean, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but the fees that they charge are exorbitant. So I don't think there's any way around the design aspect of it, unfortunately. Not that I'm aware of, at least.
You know, one thing I've seen with some or third parties that will show online menus for restaurants is if it's I've seen some really bad scans of menus, and so it doesn't do the restaurant any good when you see that bad representation. So make sure, if you have a really nice menu, a graphic designer built it, put it together, you can probably create a PDF version that can then be used for uploads and whatnot. So you can make sure that presence is really good for you.
And I haven't seen any of those third-party apps where you can link directly to the website.
So with that, we have one more question. Maybe a little bit of time. A question would you place your highest margin items first on these third-party sites?
Yes, if you have the ability to move through them at volume and try it. If you've not made the leap to those third-party apps, Don wrote in the chat, read the contracts very carefully because it's difficult to get out of them. I would absolutely agree with that. On those third-party apps, maybe you only have 3 or 4 items, but those are things that your kitchen can turn out quickly, even when busy. They're high-profit items, and they're things that people want. And they're things that, to be honest, like as somebody who loves to eat, that travel well. Like if you've ever gotten French fries as a takeout thing delivered, it's miserable, right? Like I don't want it, right? Because they're no good. They're soggy by the time they get to the house. So think about all of those things as you decide what to throw up on Grubhub.
Awesome. Well, great way to wrap up. I do want to wrap up, Gabe. Will you share a little bit about the Local First Food Incubator and Accelerator program, just so the participants know that resource is out there?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you. So I operate an incubator kitchen in the East Valley. We currently are incubating about 33 small food businesses that are farmers market stands, pop-up vendors, food trucks. And we start by taking folks that have an idea and how do you scale that to be a business? So the line I always say is just because you make great salsa, I mean, that's nice, but that's not a business, right? So making great salsa is an idea, it's a seed, it's a beginning, but how do you do things like apply for a business license? How do you get an EIN incorporated as an LLC, business insurance, digital marketing? And so we really incubate those businesses. And then also we give them space to be able, commercial kitchen space, to act as a commissary to grow their mobile food business. So we start with like micro and startup entrepreneurs.
Excellent, thank you. We appreciate Gabe will be back with us in August for an additional follow-up session. So please join us for that. It will be August 3rd, Tuesday, for Food Math Profit Strategies for your restaurant. So be aware of that. We also invite you to attend all of the other upcoming sessions every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 a.m. We have a boot camp webinar. So please feel free to join us and learn some of that expert content to help support your business. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Again, thank you, Gabe, for joining us. And we will see you already on Thursday. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.